This is the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. Today, I'm joined by Gabrielle Smith, who is an early childhood and special educational needs consultant and specialist. Thank you for joining me today, Gabby.
Hello, Angelica. Yeah, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me on.
And I know that it is a little bit of a tricky time because you're working from home, so you've got your children around you.
Yeah, you might hear a few giggles or murmurs in the background.
That is absolutely fine. So today we are talking about raising the awareness of the one-to-one role in an early childhood setting. So, Gabby, I just wanted you to kind of outline what do we mean when we say a one-to-one role? What does that involve? Who is it?
So it's a person who has been employed or volunteers in a setting, and they provide like a security blanket. They provide a familiar base for a child to grow and develop at their own pace.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a role that is very interchangeable, which has to be flexible, and it has to take in lots of different factors throughout the day. And they have to manage parents, the child, other children at the setting, and staff and other plans and events that happen and occur. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say the role of a one-to-one is.
So a very flexible role. And I know that you really value that one-to-one role. You think it's very important, but you do see in settings that you visit and in your experience of working in the early childhood sector that this role isn't recognised enough as a skilled role in particular.
Yeah, so when I wrote the article, I was really had the mindset through working in settings, like throughout my career, I've worked in schools and lots of different places. I'm regarded as a special educational expert now. And all I've ever done through my roles has been a one-to-one, but I've stuck at being a one-to-one. Mm-hmm. And I've done it in detail. And as I've grown, I've worked with more complex children and cases and scenarios. But I've always been a one-to-one. Mm-hmm. So it's really difficult as I've grown through my career as such. Now my opinion is very valued, but when I was just a one-to-one in a setting, I recognised that my opinion wasn't that valid for other practitioners, for management. And when I visit settings and they disregard what that one-to-one has said, and they don't include them in meetings, I'm the person who asks, well, why is that? Why are you going against the most valuable source? So I want to raise the awareness for and advocate the importance of a one-to-one role, and that it's not something that's just an additional thing that we put in place to make us look like we've made the effort. Mm-hmm. And that it's something that we pay a low wage for, and actually they're there to just make it a little bit more easier. And I just want to like eliminate that, because it makes the person who's doing the role feel like they're not valued, and it also takes away how much enjoyment and happiness they can bring to a child. And how life-changing that one-to-one can be.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. You know, they're really supporting that child's learning and development and their all-round holistic well-being, and ensuring that they are able to be part of a setting. Whereas if that one-to-one support wasn't there, they would not be able to integrate into the setting just like all the other children. So I know that we've discussed previously that this role is often kind of an entry role into the sector. So can you tell me a little bit more about that in your experience?
So I think when you look into sort of an employment like sector of when you're looking at staffing, you might be looking at it as, okay, we've got this member of staff who hasn't got that much experience, so we're not going to give them the planning or the structure of being a practitioner, but actually they'll be really good at this one-to-one role. And then that practitioner grows and they move out of the role, and then the next unexperienced person steps in and they become trained, and then they move on. So it's looked at as a starting point, instead of a really valuable role that really sort of magnifies everything about early years, and the skills that you learn from that makes you a fantastic practitioner and teacher. But if you were to stay in that role, you should be treated just as equally as how you would be treated if you moved on to the teaching role. And that's what I'm trying to get the balance across as. I'm sorry, I'm just going to pick my baby up. I'm just going to...
It's okay.
Sorry for the pause.
So with what you were just saying, it seems as if this one-to-one role shouldn't really be an entry role, therefore, because actually you need a lot of skills and experience to be able to support a child with specific needs or more complex needs.
Yeah, so it actually takes a real skilled and experienced practitioner to be able to complete this role to the best that it, and how it should be delivered. But because for years and years and years, it has been a role that is a lower paid role, to have someone who has a teacher status or who has lots of experience, they'll say like it's an unaffordable situation to be in, because it is an additional person.
And
in terms of funding,
ratios.
So which then brings you back down to that situation. Do we not have somebody then? And we work on the practitioners who are in the room, or just having another person, does that take the strain off, even if they don't have the knowledge, but are they willing to learn the knowledge? So it becomes quite this conflict of back and forth. And then there's this idea, oh, you work in a school, or you work in an earlier setting, and you're just the one-to-one.
Unfortunately, that is how it's often seen, isn't it? You know, that just in quotation marks a one-to-one, and it's the same kind of treatment we get from other professions that don't understand the early years sector when we say you just play with children and that is your job, and now we're kind of seeing it with this one-to-one role. So that is something that we need to change within our own sector, because we understand how damaging that is. And I think maybe it starts with that awareness. So like this conversation that me and you are having right now, and sharing it with the wider early years sector, I think is so important, because perhaps a lot of managers and owners don't actually necessarily realize the impact it's having on those practitioners that are one-to-ones.
Yeah.
The fact that it's deprofessionalizing them even more, and then therefore carrying on that deprofessionalization of the sector, which we really don't need. We're really trying to get out of it.
Yeah, and we're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not building a stronger, more inclusive practice amongst the sector. We're taking that away, because we're looking back at our own practice and forgetting about it. We're forgetting about all of the things that brought us there, because we imagine our career to be a straight line, but actually it's got lots of tumbles and turns that probably you want to forget about, but it actually makes you who you are, and it makes you deliver that next level of practice from all of that experience. So I find it really sad when I'll speak to a teacher and they'll say, oh, well, it's just the one-to-one, like they're good, but they can't work it. I think it's because they've not got the experience, they've not got the knowledge. And I'll say, well, did you ever work as a teaching assistant? Did that inspire you to become a teacher? Did you, when you did your teacher training and when you was in a room, would you say you were not a valued member then? And if you put a turning point back on yourself, actually it was very valuable to you. And if you didn't have people around you who were listening and supporting you through that, then you wouldn't be in the position you are now.
Yeah, I think that's where good leadership comes in, isn't it? The fact that for instance, if it's in a school, the teacher needs to be a leader to the teaching assistant or the one-to-one, and they need to make sure that they are feeling valued, whatever their role, whatever their position, and then therefore not isolated. So often a one-to-one special educational needs practitioner, for instance, may feel quite lonely in a setting or in a school. I know that's something that you have certainly experienced.
Yeah, so I talk about the role as being, it's a very exciting role in the fact that you get this real close relationship, and you get to see a child grow and develop, and you can plan their next steps, and you can really enjoy when they succeed, even in those tiny little steps. But because you know that child so well, sometimes you're working in a room or an environment where somebody else doesn't recognize that strength, because there isn't that time to reflect and to talk about it. And therefore, all of your day and your experience and all of those highs and the lows get shut out, and you experience them on your own. And if you have nowhere to go to talk and reflect on that, it can slowly start to eat you down. And that's why the morning briefing and a debrief in the evening for 5 minutes amongst your room and the members of staff that you work with is crucial. And that should include everybody, including your one-to-one who is in your room, if you're lucky enough to have one.
Because they're part of that team, aren't they? And it's all about connecting as a team and making sure that, like we were saying earlier, everyone's feeling valued, but also you're working in partnership and you're really kind of coordinating your practice and your values and your ethos and making sure you're moving in the same direction.
Yeah, and if we take away from how it makes us feel as members of staff, how does it make the child feel if not everybody else is listening to their algorithm of life and the way that they learn, and actually the way they see it and their learning opportunities? If that's not spread across the room or the whole setting of where they play and interact, then we're not being inclusive. We're not delivering outstanding practice, because we're eliminating children from being able to experience that.
So you're saying that everyone in the classroom or the room should understand that child's needs. It's not just the one-to-one practitioner that needs to know the child.
They're the everyone. Voice. Yeah, the one-to-one is the voice for the child. And I think that's what's forgotten. They can express in an adult form all of those emotions that a child goes through, and actually what works really well for them and what doesn't, and they deliver that. And I believe that anybody who is putting their heart and soul into their job as a one-to-one wants to scream and shout about all of these things, because it's what keeps you going in your work. So if that's shut down, then it becomes a very, very challenging role, because you're doing everything you can, you care, and you want to give the child these equal opportunities, but you're let down by your own setting, and that's difficult.
Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't allow the one-to-one practitioner to kind of give their best to that child, I guess, and be a good one-to-one practitioner. You know, there's a difference between, like we say, kind of in quotation marks, just a one-to-one, and actually a one-to-one support for the child who really understands their needs and gives them what that child requires at that time by understanding them as that unique child. So what would you say makes a good one-to-one as opposed to just a one-to-one?
So it's somebody who can recognize behavior as communication. So I would say a practitioner who reacts when a behavior has happened is already behind. If we act on only the behavior, then we've missed opportunities already. Because if a child is becoming anxious, or they are about to lose their regulation for emotion, and they can't balance that, there are warning signs. And in knowing the children around you and knowing when that is escalating and how to de-escalate it, that's when you become an outstanding practitioner. Because you know where that child is at, how much learning and information they can absorb at the moment, and how much to take away. Sorry, I can just see my little baby crawling.
That's okay.
Yeah, so it's okay to act on behavior. So when something's escalating, you're acting because it's happened and you're dealing with it. But what makes a great practitioner is the fact that you knew that was coming, and you've stopped it, and you've moved it around, and you've changed that really chaotic and what may say quite traumatic experience, you know, and you've gone around. And it's like with food. So we say with the ASD, so if you've got a pasta dish at nursery, and you're asking a child to eat that dish, and they throw it, and it all escalates.
So this is a child who may be on the autism spectrum.
Yeah, and you know that maybe that's a sensory overload. That's a step too far. If you've recognised that, and you've put something alternative in, and you've predicted that actually this is not going to work. I've spoke to mum, and she says that this happens. Okay, we've tried, and now we're going to put a sandwich in, and actually we're going to keep it nice and fun, and we're not going to make a big deal of the behaviour. We're going to look at the positives of the fact that they're still eating, and they're happy, and they're having interactions, and they're sat with other children, and we look at all of that. That is outstanding practice. What's not outstanding practice is on the negative, is focusing on the fact, okay, they're throwing the food, and now they're shouting, and now all the children are stood up, and there's food being thrown
that's when you act, but actually it's too late.
And then it becomes like, how do we stop all of this? And it's all chaotic, and this child just causes problems within our setting. And actually it's about recognizing that might be traumatic for us as staff, but actually that's really traumatic for the child.
Yeah.
You know, and we statistics tell us that children with additional needs who have had sort of a trauma when they're younger around food are more likely, any child who has that trauma around food when they're younger escalates into things like anorexia and bulimia and this body image and negative things. And working through the sector, I've worked on psychiatric wards as I've sort of developed and gone into different roles with early years. And when I have gone into depth with these children, they can pinpoint it back to early memories even in their nurseries and preschools where they've been eliminated for not recognising that. And that's just a snippet, like that's not
of course, that makes perfect sense.
So yeah, and that's just one area. So talking about food, but there's so many different areas of a practitioner's day where we work with children that where we focus on the negative, we focus on that, and we forget. And what makes a really good one-to-one is actually not setting a bar, not giving it. It's like in schools, and we'll say, well, we've told them if they carry on with that, they're not having the break time. Okay, so if they continue when you take the break time away, where's your leverage there?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll just tell them they're not having lunchtime. Okay, so if they still continue because we're not recognizing what's actually going on, we're not looking deeper into it. All we're doing is taking away. And what about when we've took all of the things away? Where do we go from there?
So it's not necessarily about the child needing to adapt to the school setting or the nursery setting. It's about us as educators needing to make sure that we provide what the child needs, that our practice is actually supporting that child rather than punishing the child for not being able to fit into these kind of binary boxes of what it looks like to be a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, what we're expecting every child to do.
And when you deliver that level of practice, I feel that as a sector, we do that area an injustice because you go to this length and you teach and you change the practice and you change the environment, you create this for somebody to disregard you as just a one-to-one who, who isn't that significant, but actually makes so much difference amongst the setting.
Yeah. And that they're doing such an important role in terms of what all educators are kind of encouraged to do and trying to do, and the ethos around that unique child and understanding your key children and understanding every child's needs. And they're really kind of doing that to such a higher level, and it's such a more kind of skilled part of their job, isn't it? That really, really tuning into that unique child. And that really is such a huge part of what we as educators do in early childhood. So they're like at the pinnacle of it, really. Yeah. Of that practice.
And what I try to say to settings, actually, if you have somebody who's gone to this level and you don't value them, you're missing out, because the whole setting improves, the practice spreads across to everybody. In those meetings that we have, if everybody's included and we're fluid and we talk about and we communicate, we become to have more of a fluid practice. Different styles integrate with each other and the practice becomes fluid, and there is an element of happiness amongst the setting because everybody is on the same page and there isn't this hierarchy of I'm more qualified, I know more than you listen to what I say, and you're not allowed to excel yourself because you're not in my role. And if you have a rigid structure like that, it's not the children, the children are missing out, the setting's missing out, and actually the staff are missing out because everybody becomes in this quite tight box.
That kind of makes me wonder how important language is and what we label different roles and kind of those job titles, and whether that needs to change as well. I know there's a few educators out there that I'm speaking to, and I'll be sharing on this podcast as well, that do have strong views on how vital how important language is and how vital it is to consider what names we give to certain roles and then how they may deprofessionalize or professionalize us in the sector.
Yeah, definitely. You know, one change in the name of a role and somebody looks at you completely differently. And I can vouch for that through my career. You know, I can honestly say the way I work with practitioners and I work with the children, you know, my passion and my love all them years ago was exactly the same. Yes, I have learned and I have developed, and I've done that through getting things wrong, planning activities that didn't work and realizing and recognizing signs. But as my role has changed from apprentice to nursery assistant to nursery nurse to nursery manager to coordinator to quality assessor, as I've gone up the rankings, nothing about who I am has changed. But the way people see me, you know, my work with the kids has not changed. But my knowledge and how much people actually listen to me has changed dramatically. You know, I say one thing now and everybody does it. But I could have been screaming that for weeks, months, years.
If you knew it before.
As a one-to-one, and nobody would listen. And that you know, that really hits home.
Yeah, it's that issue of status and those power dynamics, isn't it? And that's a really interesting thing to go into.
You know, probably it's a bit of a hard word to use, but I don't agree with it. And that's why people ask me when I manage, why do you collaborate so much? Why do you listen to other people's opinions so much? And I say, I cannot make a decision without listening to everybody's opinion. I might not use exactly what one person says and absorb every part of it, but I'm listening and I'm taking it all in, so I can provide a balanced opinion back.
It's all about listening to all those voices in the team, in the setting, in the sector, isn't it?
Including your baby.
Hello, little one. But yeah, you're 100% right. You need to, especially as a leader, you need to tune in to all of your team members' voices and make sure that, one, they're feeling valued and heard, and two, that you are actually listening, because they do have something to say, from those apprentices to the one-to-ones to the room leaders. They all have something to add to the setting, to practice, to your knowledge as a leader or a manager, for instance.
Yeah.
So yeah, your approach is so vital to be undertaken by, you know, by so many other leaders out there and managers out there.
And one thing I will say, it's all right me saying, okay, I'm a great leader now, or I'm this and I'm that. Actually, what makes me good when I'm working with children with additional needs, especially, but any child, is the environment that is created around me. You know, until I really worked in some very, very difficult environments, I believe that I could deliver outstanding learning and this ability to integrate children into any situation, because I'd done it, but I'd done it in the right environments. And I think you can be an outstanding practitioner and you can work really hard, but if you don't put that time into the environment around you and create a space which children can have learning provocations and it's right for them as an individual, then they will never reach their full potential. Now, that's just my opinion of it. That doesn't mean that's, you know, set in stone. But you can think you're an outstanding teacher and think that you are great, but the environment around you is just as an important, you know, role in that.
For sure. And it goes back to the earliest foundation stage that we follow in England of an enabling environment. And so much of what we've talked about today really links into that, in terms of that enabling environment and the unique child as well. You know, those aspects that are so vital to early childhood and children's learning and development.
Learning and development. That's you.
So smiley. It's so lovely having you both on here.
Well,
hello. Because we're talking about people like you. We're talking about little ones. So we need to have you part of the conversation. This is the voice of early childhood. It's not the voice of educators. It is the voice of everyone in early childhood, just like you.
say I'm the baby advocator. We don't talk about language development or development of babies and additional needs in babies enough. It's not recognised, and it should be. Yeah, I'm the edge. Listen to me.
Well, this is a fantastic way of involving the whole of you know, the early childhood sector, because now we've got little Arthur here as well as Gabby. So we've got Gabby as the kind of consultant and SEN specialist, and also as a parent, and then we've got Arthur, so we've got kind of the range of representing those voices who are involved with children. I mean, like, this is the perfect example of exactly why we're doing what we're doing. Oh, well, Gabby, thank you so much for being on here. It's been lovely talking to you about such an important role that, as you rightly say, is just not recognised enough at all. And I think it's just about opening up that conversation initially and raising that awareness, and then being able to do something bit by bit, you know, setting by setting, and also in those wider organisations. And it's like, this is a start. And because I've not heard many people talk about this at all.
Yeah, and you know, if you're in a role where you feel like you stood still as a one-to-one, or you're just you know, you're not progressing in your career, just reflect on actually what you do in a day, and all of those valuable moments, and how much the quality that you bring to that setting. You know, please don't ever, you know, underestimate how valuable that is.
Well, it's about reflecting on your role and seeing just what a big part of the setting you are, and how much you bring to the child and the child's family.
Yeah, and you know, recognize it and express it. Say, you know, you can say you're valuable. You need to be scared to say that. That's one thing that I would say. If you feel like you're not being heard, say, I'm not being heard. Because it's not just about the practitioner, it's about the child. No practitioner would stand here and say it's acceptable for a child's voice not to be heard.
And then the same goes for them as well. And if they're representing the child's voice, then they need to be heard. So I guess seeing it in that way, because obviously there's the lack of professionalism and lack of confidence in the sector. We all know that. So it's difficult to say, actually, I'm not being heard, or I'm going to stand up for myself. That is a really difficult thing to do. But I guess framing it as, well, if I don't do it, then I'm not doing the child enough justice. Then that may be an easier way to kind of step into advocating for your own role.
Yeah, because it's the focus off of yourself, and actually, I am the voice of the child, and every child deserves to be heard. And that's the angle that it you know, it gives you leverage.
I love that. I feel like that's a great kind of place to round it off. And yeah, I'll definitely be using that quote of, you know, I'm the voice of the child and the child deserves to be heard. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Gabby and Arthur, for joining us today. And you can, so for our listeners, you can read Gabby's article on raising awareness of the one-to-one role on the Voice of Early Childhood website. And do please share this episode to ensure that this conversation is taken a lot further and the one-to-one role is recognised. So thank you both for joining me. Arthur, are you going to say bye?
Bye.
Bye, Alba.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Gabby. And we'll speak soon.